Um, so yeah, brilliant. Thank you for doing this.
It's all right.
Your book, like, I don't really want to talk about it because I didn't know anything about the Markovic affair, and
Okay,
it's kind of so weird because it's like so written like a thriller. I mean, we'll get into it in a minute,
sure.
but it's like it's I don't know, like because you've done quite a few Q&As, haven't you? Like you did something with Jason Solomons and people.
Yeah, a little bit when the book came out. Yeah.
And did you talk about kind of like the all the context in the book when you were doing those?
I mean, it's quite tough because there's a lot of stuff going on in the book. I mean, it's funny because when the first reviews came out and stuff, my dad called me, and I had really good reviews. It's good to get a review
Yeah.
anyway for a book, and I had like lots, and so I was like, "This is great." And my dad called me. He's like, "Yeah, but don't you think they said a bit too much about what happens?" And it is tough, obviously, for people to talk about the book without giving too much
Yeah.
away,
Like whenever I
because
introduce a film, I kind of like don't talk about the plot
yeah,
because
yeah,
I kind of
yeah.
don't want to ruin it for people that haven't seen it before. And I think you've written a book about like this whole incident that is like off the scale bigger than the Profumo affair. It kind of like brings in everything from the student riots to politics and everything. And you're kind of like, hang on a minute, like how can I talk about this?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad because I wanted it to be this wide-ranging book which captured a period in French history or European history, but also to have the kind of pace and light-footedness of a thriller. So
Yeah.
I knew that as I was writing it, I had to explain certain things which most readers wouldn't know, which required me to do a lot of reading and a lot of
Yeah.
research, which was a pleasure, but also quite stressful. Um, because how do you get all that down to the page? And in the end, I think it was just my like love of detail, for example. I wanted to know if you worked on the Vice Squad, like where was your office? How did you get into
Yeah.
that office? How many stairs there were? Did it smell of floor polish or cigarettes? Or that, what was the sound,
Yeah.
etc., etc. So I sort of deep dived, and I think occasionally in the book I've had these kind of breakout almost essays, I guess you'd call them, and they give
Yeah.
us sort of a little bit of context. I've kept them short though, and so it's something about the background on the sort of how crime developed, or how
Yes.
the political like background stuff happened. But I kind of kept the even though it becomes a political scandal, for me that was always kind of peripheral and also quite complicated to talk about because in order to a lot of the French books that have spoken about the Markovic affair, they're very political. They're all about
Okay.
how this affair was done to basically take the government down. And I knew if I did that for a reader, because even for me, it was quite boring. There are so many names. You have to know all these French politicians and cabinet
Yes.
members going back sort of 20 years and forward another 15. So eventually I was just like, no, the things that interest me are the overlap. And that's why Markovic is fascinating, the character at the center of
Yeah.
this book, the person who's killed, is because you get this overlapping world of cinema, which is a huge fascination, obsession of mine, crime, which is obviously an obsession, and you've got this sort of murky intersection with politics and espionage. And I thought, but between that, for me, those three provide the perfect sort of
Yeah.
trifecta to write a rocket
Yeah, because of
story.
the whole kind of, I suppose, because of the Yugoslavian kind of like that kind of angle on it as well,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
because you've got to look at that, and I kind of just, I thought you kind of wrote brilliantly about the kind of riots and stuff as well, and kind of like, and yeah, and that's like one of your essays when you kind of explain why the riots happened and the strikes, and then like the whole of the
Yeah.
country getting behind them.
It's
Um,
crazy, yeah. And even that was just I wanted to we in our mind's eye, unless you've studied it, have these sort of emblematic images of students prying paving
yeah,
stones from the floor or throwing them at police or cars on fire or barricades and stuff. But reading about that was really fascinating. I reduced it to one chapter and obviously
yeah,
made it as part of the story. But like I wanted to know like, how you made a barricade and where the students would mass and where the police, and it was fascinating, and what kind of truncheons the police were using and how eventually they changed the type of truncheon because it would the first ones they were using would leave marks of these wooden sticks, these
yeah,
batons. So they started using these rubber coated metal ones, which caused more damage but didn't leave lasting marks and
yes,
stuff.
because
And
there's
so
a
you're
real
like,
detail on it when you say about them hitting
yeah,
people under the armpits.
mm, really hurts and you can't, it doesn't leave a mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, and it was, it's kind of stuff like that that is kind of like really kind of forensic almost, I guess you would call it. And it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's weird because I kind of feel like your writing's almost like a kind of Wes Anderson film, you know, that kind of
That's what
level
you
of
mean. Yeah,
detail.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and also not just because of the French Dispatch having that scene, that having the kind of like the scene with Timothy Chalamet being like in the 1968 riots and
Mm,
stuff.
mm,
But
mm.
there's something about it kind of like, and like just going back to like your history, like the way you started and you're kind of after you'd kind of been at SOAS, you then kind of went to
Yeah.
Paris and had loads of um, odd jobs. I think it's described us somewhere,
Yeah, yeah.
and like Delon did as well. It's really weird because I
Yeah.
kind of see like you and Delon and Ripley and Plan Soleil, and there's kind of like so
Yeah.
like in my head you kind of all merged together.
I mean, it's the advantage of, or possibly my downfall is writing a book about Delon is that there's always his photo somewhere near mine. It's sort of like Beauty and the Beast or whatever. But no, I thought it was good when I uncovered. I knew a bit about his background. Delon. So Delon's obviously a huge sort of figure for me, especially when I arrived in Paris. And I say in the book, I spent a lot of time in cinemas because they have so many independent cinemas in Paris.
Yeah,
And I was doing all these odd jobs, and it was one of the places you could get this little book called Periscope. It was like 50
yes,
centimes, and it had all the cinema listings. And I just go, and most of the time you couldn't understand it, and it was a good way to learn French as well. And I just thought, Delon, I remember seeing this samurai, and I just thought, this is the coolest man on earth.
also the coolest
And
film.
it's so cool. It's ice cold, and then that made me obsessed with Melville and stuff. So I always knew him as this kind of icon who's larger than an icon, really. It's a cultural phenomenon. That's what I discovered
Yeah,
researching the book more. But to go dig back into his history and work out sort of how he became the icon was fascinating. When I came across that part of him being a waiter and walking out of his
yeah.
job as a waiter, I told the publisher, he was so happy. He's like, "This is fantastic." The irony was, I had been a waiter and I had stuck with it, whereas Delon, being Delon, had walked out after a while.
Yeah.
No one speaks to Delon like this,
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't
and
have had a
it's
waiter in Paris if you hadn't stuck at it. I mean, that's kind of like
true,
that's kind of
exactly.
how. So I came to you because I found when it first came out, I saw it in Hatchards
Mm.
on Piccadilly, and I was just like, and I just completely just bought into just a book called A Waiter in Paris, and I kind of like whenever I'm describing it to people. Also, everyone that's reading your book now that I know read A Waiter in Paris as well, and
Oh,
I
amazing.
like, and it's really funny because I was having a conversation with someone yesterday or the day before, just saying that Paris kind of smells of coffee, red wine, cigarettes, and dog shit. And they kind of like, as I was saying that, they finished it by saying dog shit as well, and then they went, although not so much anymore. And it's like there's something in the way that you write that you can kind of smell the
Mm.
kind of like what you're writing about in the same way that you
Yeah,
can
I think
smell the
that's
Riviera
it.
when you're writing about that.
Yeah, it's important for me. I guess it's scene setting. I think, and obviously we're talking about cinema a bit here as well,
Yeah,
but I have a very visual, sort of almost cinematic way of seeing things in my mind's eye, and that's what I try to convey on the page. And when you're watching an opening scene of a film or something, and you can hear, I don't know, the cicadas, and you can see the
yeah,
water rippling and stuff, and I can see how hot it is from the flagstones around the pool, kind
yeah,
of thing. Like that's the detail and I think that's the key with good writing and bad writing. I'm not trying to like blow my own trumpet, but it's getting those details which if make the scene instantly evocative and quite powerful.
yeah,
And smell is one of those things I think people tend to forget. And I guess it's something that comes up more and more now with like this risk of AI writing is like AI hasn't felt or experienced things. So often you'll see it misses out,
right.
describing what it feels like to be there. Not that that was the reason I was doing it, but it's obviously just for me, it's the lived experience to put you into the scene, and then you're
Yeah.
there, and then bam, you can get on with the characters.
But it's a bit like when you write about that first scene in The Samurai and you write about the kind of car scene and things. You kind of write about it in such. I mean, I know that film so well. I showed that
Mm.
under the Aesop shop in Lamb's Conduit
Okay.
Street years ago.
Oh,
Like
really
before I
cool.
started properly doing Rebel Reel, I just used to show films to my mates. And I managed to
Yeah.
persuade them that I'd show it down there because it looked a bit like Jeff's bedroom in the basement.
That's perfect.
But like you like it, because you kind of describe it, like you describe that really, really well. And also because you say that you're a screenwriter as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I do some
Yeah.
screenwriting as well. Yeah.
And so what things have you done then, or are you hoping to do, or
Well, I mean, the difference with screenwriting is you tend to work on a lot of stuff which never gets made. It's sort of in
yeah,
development and then someone changes. So there's been a few various different things. I worked obviously as well on the adaptation of A Waiter in Paris
yes,
to film, which is being shot in October in Paris. And then at the moment I'm doing a thing on a heist. I worked on like a like TV series stuff as well. So
What,
it's sort of
like a Melville style kind of?
yeah. Well, it's funny because it's actually a rewrite because it's something that's been done by an American. I can't say too much about it, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's a French heist, but it's missing the French stuff, and so obviously all my influences are
Yeah.
Melville and Rififi and Touche Bower
Oh
Grisby
my
and
God,
stuff. And
yeah.
I was like, you've got to go, just make it like this. So my rewrite is going to be very French noir,
Okay.
whether it gets used or not. But for me,
Like a
those are my
27-minute
touchstone.
moment of silence in the middle of it.
Exactly, no dialogue
I mean, it's just
as we
so
do
weird
the red.
because, yeah, I mean, I suppose then it's like, what is it? What did you say in your book? It's like 3 minutes and 47 seconds of dialogue in The
In
Samurai.
the samurai, yeah, it's incredible. It's nothing. Yeah, he says
Also,
nothing.
so I watched Plan Soleil last night, and the end, I was just like, jaw dropping because obviously the Mangala version of it is great.
Yeah.
Um, but there's something about it, and that was actually one of my favorite bits of your book as well when you describe Alain Delon saying that he won't play, that he
Mm-mm.
wants to play
It's
Ripley, and he just,
it's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, he's an unknown actor.
I mean,
He's sort of getting known in Paris, and he turns down the role of Greenleaf. And they're like,
yeah,
you know, Maurice Ronet, who's the biggest actor at the time, he elevated the gallows, etc., was going to play Ripley, and he's like, no.
yeah,
And he just so like, you know, strong-willed that he'll sit there and say, I'm not fucking doing it, literally with that language. And and I read various accounts of that meeting from all of them, and they all say the same thing. Like this guy sat there and they tried to intimidate him, the producers and director, by
yes,
sitting there ready for him. And he's like, I'm not playing him. It's not me. I'm Ripley. And that sort of set the sort of tone for all the things he did for the next
yeah.
15, 20
So
years
when you're
almost.
doing so, because obviously, like kind of like you very clearly said, it's narrative nonfiction, and so when you're doing it and you're piecing together those scenes, so you can write those scenes, you're obviously doing
Mm.
like tons and tons of, and like what is it, the crime library? What's that called in French that you used to go to?
Yeah, the Bibliothèque Policière in
Yeah,
the Fifth Arrondissement, amazing place. Yeah,
yeah,
just the bet it's a procrastinator's dream if you're into, which it sounds quite niche, but anything to do with like espionage, murder, crime, poisoned guns, mafia sanctioned hits, the whole lot. It's
yeah,
just books and books, and all sorts of languages as well, newspaper cuttings, which is where incidentally I came across the Markovic affair for the first time.
yeah,
Because I used to just go and work in different libraries around Paris. And I thought it was a film I hadn't seen from Delon, which made me intrigued. Then it turned out it was real. And I was like, how does no one know about this? And I just carried on reading about it. And as a writer, my intention was to sort of keep it in my back pocket and use it maybe as a framework for a contemporary story or take
yeah,
elements of it and use it later on. And so at one point I had written a kind of a treatment for film or TV series, I can't remember, sort of based a similar modern version, but using a sort of young Emmanuel Macron-like figure
right,
who's coming to power and whatever this, and it was quite compelling. But it was, when I was speaking to my UK publisher about what to do next, and he basically sort of swatted away my 5 book ideas, saying he'd done them previously and no one buys that kind of thing, and that's rubbish because we've had a big failure on that. And we had another bottle of wine, and then I just started talking about the Markovic affair. I said, "Oh, you'll love this story. This is great." Not as a pitch. I had no idea I was going to do it as a book.
just out of interest, sort
And
of thing.
yeah, I was like, "This is great. You'll love this," because there's like
Yeah,
Paris and France and all this kind of gangster stuff. And then he stopped me in the middle. He goes, "This is your next book." And I
yeah,
thought, "No way! Like, where do I even begin with something like this?" So I went away for about a year and I did what I would call sort of due diligence. And so I read everything on the
yeah,
topic to see like if everything's already been written, like it's hard for me to find a way through it. And the good news was everything that was written on it wasn't how I perceived the story and how I would conceive a story. I was like, it's missing all the stuff. I said at the beginning, it was the French stuff's very about the politics. The last
yeah.
book was called, for example, A Body on the Route to the Elysee. So it sort of
Okay,
tells you it's about the political scandal. Um, and then everything else online just didn't track. It didn't correspond. No one was saying the same thing. It's really frustrating. I was like, and one thing that was really frustrating me, it was like, who the hell is Stevan Markovic, the guy at the
yeah,
center of this story who gets assassinated and almost topples the government? I was like, this story is incredible. He's arrived in France in 1958, a nobody from Yugoslavia. Something happened. He's come into the household of Delon. He's sort of his best friend, bodyguard. His different journalists use different words. And then suddenly he's assassinated and he's left these letters saying if anything happens to him, it's,
Yeah,
Delon and this Corsican gangster. And you're like, this is unbelievable. So I wanted to fill in all those blanks. And I had this assumption that he would be the hard person to write about because he's a nobody. And Delon, being this huge
yeah,
star, would be relatively easy to write about because his life is, as I say in the book, archived and he's everywhere. And the advantage is I can tell you how Delon moves, I can tell you how he speaks, I can tell you what he thinks in a way he's told us. But in the end, he became just as difficult to write about because it's not clear who he is. He presents a version of
yeah.
himself. He presents Delon the myth, but there's a man hiding behind it. And it was so in order to piece it all together, to go back to your original question, yeah, I had to read a lot of stuff and often read several different accounts of the same thing. And bearing in mind at the center there's this police inquiry and everybody's lying, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
You're reading police transcripts and they're all lying. So you're like, there's a version of the truth I had to navigate through and find that I felt comfortable with. I imagine if a different writer used the same material, they might plot a slightly different path depending on where their sort of
Yeah.
morals or feelings towards certain characters, people, sorry, like lay. It's funny that I do this quite a lot. I call them characters and they're not people because I see it so much as a film, the whole thing, but actually they were all real people.
But they are characters, aren't they, as well, in a way? Because
They
like Delon,
act like characters.
you don't really get a sense of who he is particularly.
Impossible. No, there's an emptiness at
Um,
the center of
Not
film,
in
I think.
your book, I mean, generally. And I kind of feel like his lust, his desire for hanging around with gangsters is kind of it's like, have you been to Gainsbourg's house in
No,
Paris?
but it's all painted black, right? I think it
Yeah,
opened a
and you
couple
can
of
go
years
around
ago.
and Charlotte Gainsbourg does an audio tour that you listen to.
Oh, amazing.
And she's done it in French and English, so it's like La Piscine, dual language. And she just and there's bits where she goes, "Oh, and that's where Daddy like used to put us in the bath and stuff like that." And he has this insane collection of police badges because he used to get
Okay.
drunk, then get driven home by the police and ask them to give him their badge and sometimes their gun. And he was obsessed with guns as well, in the same way that like
Guns.
Delon is. And there's it's like I think the pair of them are these kind of personas, and it's like I suppose
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
all
yeah.
celebrity, where you've got your kind of like your mask of celebrity and kind of like who people perceive you to be, and then the real you.
Totally, yeah. No, no,
And
definitely. And
I mean,
it must be tiring to play that
exhausting,
role
I
all the
think.
time.
Yeah. And I think and it's like, I think it's quite funny because you kind of touch on the kind of on Delon's potential bisexuality that Claudia Cardinale
Mm,
said in her autobiography about when
yeah.
Simon the Leopard and stuff. But I sent you that quote like loneliness is a part of my life. I live well
Mm,
with it, and I kind of got the impression, and also from your book, that he kind of like had this kind of hole that he was constantly.
totally, yeah.
He didn't know who he
There's
was.
a no, there's something very unsettling about him at the core of Delon. What was amazing about him was to read. I've made this comparison before. It's not quite right, but it's funny because it's quite jarring. When people describe Princess Diana going into a room or speaking to her, apparently it was just this most incredible like magnetism she had.
Yeah,
And people would describe a similar thing with young Delon. There'd be a party going on, or he'd walk into a room or into a conversation, and the energy would change. When he had the charm switched on, he was completely capable of changing everything. So that, as you're young, must have a strange effect on you to be able to control people
hundred
that much.
percent.
And you become obviously quite manipulative, and you're somebody who can get whatever they want from people all the time. So you end up with this sort of voracious appetite of just consuming all the things around you. I
Even
describe him
maybe
kind of like a black
unconsciously.
hole.
It's not. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's
yeah, yeah.
deliberate. I think it's like I've been in a room like a couple of times with Kate Moss, and the energy
Mm.
around everyone changes, and it's not to do with her per se. It's the fact that she's there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I've been
yeah.
in other rooms like with like Pharrell Williams a couple of times, and it's kind of like everyone's energy changes, and you kind of like I think you'd have to be made of Teflon as the person that is
No,
being
it's
magnet.
strange. They sort of live on this different plane, this different order of existence, I think. And certain
Yeah,
people are, whether it's higher or lower, that's for you to decide. But
yeah,
it just felt like an alternate reality, and yeah, there's something very unsettling about him because people describe this magnetism, this charm, this beauty, this unsettling beauty. But then he could also describe him being like, narcissistic and bullying and petty and aggressive
Yeah.
and violent. He was somebody who was capable of being absolutely awful to the people closest to him that he loved. And then going back to what you originally said, but he loved gangsters and guns. He had so many guns. Even a few years ago before he died, the police raided his house and they confiscated like 400 firearms, something like
What?
this. Yeah, yeah, unregistered. This is how he rolls. Delon is above the law. And I
Yeah.
mean, even to the end of his life, in the sense that in France, you can't just be buried anywhere. It's illegal to, if I die, I can't ask to be buried in the garden.
Right.
You have to be buried in a certain land. But Delon, because Delon is Delon, he's above all human, laws. He was buried in his garden in a chapel he had created with his dogs, where they were
What?
buried.
Oh my
And that
God.
was fine. The town hall of the local village, like, yeah, it's fine, it's Delon, Delon. What Delon wants, Delon gets. So
Are there
even to
other
the
like
end,
are there other French figures that's been done for as well
not that
that
I'm
you're
aware
aware
of.
of?
I mean, there's probably maybe like Charles de Gaulle or something who he admired
Yeah.
greatly, and who was in the book, obviously. But not that I'm aware of. The extent of his existence, and going back to what you're saying about those stars and the energy changes around them. I think when Delon was alive as well, so in that 50s through to 60s, when the whole world's changing, and suddenly
Yeah.
mass media's there. Like, you're one of the first ever global stars, and you're a one-man show. That I must have really messed with your head or those around
Yeah.
you, or you're not a normal person in that sense.
I'm trying to think who else is kind of like, I mean, it's like, have you read Richard Burton's diaries?
No, but I've heard
They're,
they're really good.
they're so good. And also he wrote them knowing that Elizabeth Taylor was reading them. So you can, and like sometimes you can tell he's gone a little bit too far down criticism. So he then pulls it back and kind of is nice to her. Um, but it's like your scenes that you kind of write about. Yeah, you write about it sounding weird, like when you say character and scenes because they're real people. But the scenes
Yeah,
when they're skiing and stuff, and Markovic goes to like he hops the train to get to them, and
yeah.
um, it's like all the scenes like when Burton and Taylor and Gestatt and stuff, and like it just is
Yeah,
kind of
and it's crazy. And so there's an example of like I read in the police diaries about this, in the different reports and stuff. I was like, that's weird. And then the cool thing is you can go and look online or look in archives, and then I can find photos of them taken by different photographers in Switzerland, and they're all happy and stuff. And so you can
yeah,
you can see what the place looked like, you can see what they were wearing, you see what the breakfast table looked like and stuff. But then I knew in the background this other stuff was going on. There's this sort of looming shadow of Delon's shadow, Markovic, and he's there.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, so they're performing the happy couple. But what I knew from what they'd said to other people and to detectives later on, that it wasn't at all happy. It was a horrible atmosphere.
yeah.
Um, and what that reminded me of something else. And then yes, you had to work out, as I said, people were lying often in this whole process. So like I had to, for example, if you read Natalie Delon's autobiography, her affair with Stevan Delon, just well, it's a surprise. So Stevan Markovic, sorry, was
Yeah,
was sleeping with Delon. Not Delon, sorry, possibly Delon, Natalie Delon.
yeah,
And in her book, in her autobiography, it's sort of a very brief chapter in which she describes a couple of nights or maybe one night of sort of weakness just after Delon had announced he was divorcing her.
yeah,
Nothing more than that. The guy got murdered and we don't know what happened. Move on to the next chapter of her life. And it's kind of crazily short considering one of their best friends, one of their close confidants, intimates in their family
who was
household
living in
was
their house.
brutally assassinated.
Yeah,
And she says one night, but then in the police interviews, I go back to the police interviews and I can see that after she's being pushed by them a lot more, it was a whole week they were together down in Saint-Tropez sleeping together, and there was probably some stuff either side. So I could calibrate what she said publicly there for against like what I knew
yeah.
she would say privately and things. And I had to have my own sort of bellwether for adjusting, what people would say publicly to what I felt I
Yeah.
knew to be true about it.
And is that brilliant picture of them looking really uncomfortable? They're obviously, I think they're sitting in a
Yeah,
cafe in Saint Tropez.
no, exactly. And snapped, I don't know if it's awkwardly or
And it's that
not, but
classic
yeah, it
one
captures them.
of people standing around them. There is a one of Burton and Taylor like that as well, where they just look
Mm.
super uncomfortable and just people standing in their orbit.
It's incredible, yeah. And there
Yeah.
was another one I couldn't find the source for it, but you get it's great photos from the south of France. There's Stevan Markovic driving, I think in Natalie's Fiat Dino, and she's in like the passenger seat and stuff, and there's paparazzi explosions and they're going. I was like, God, he's literally replaced Delon momentarily, which is probably his dream.
Yeah.
Kind of fascinating.
According to your book with his notebook and everything, these clippings and
Yeah, obsession,
the
total
fact that
obsession.
he's
I mean, I,
doing,
I ended up being obsessed as well, which made me sort of feel like there's this chain of obsession towards Delon. My girlfriend's happy that I've put all the books away now, the books out,
yeah, I
put
can
them back
imagine.
in the cellar.
I mean, it's like, so obviously, because I was obviously, I'm showing La Piscine tomorrow. Um, and, and I started reading the book and I couldn't believe the timings on it that they were kind of like with the book, it's like, he's literally in Saint-Tropez filming it and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he gets murdered.
It's
And
it's some things were this incredible gift, and even it's the timing of the book, and I do that over those 24 hours, and all the characters are doing something which is linked to something. So yes, so Delon is filming La Piscine, which is a film about jealousy and possession and
yeah,
sexual rivalry, and he kills his best friend. And yeah, and then during this time, his best friend Stevan Markovic is killed. And then going into the film archives, I could look at the filming schedule, so I could see on what day what scenes were shot, and I could see that there's a scene in the film that you're going to show, La Piscine. There's a scene when the detective comes and asks, a new detective comes on
yes,
to the case, and he's pretty sure like that something's going on, and probably Delon has something to do with it. And he goes and interviews
yeah,
him, and then I knew that like a day later, the real police, because I could see that from the police archives, come down and again interview him about the death of his best friend. And this is what's fascinating about Delon is that he speaks like a character in a film all the time. I
yes,
don't know about you, but if I was in a room or even if I was in a house and the police came around to ask me about the brutal, violent execution of my best friend, I would
yeah,
feel, even though I was innocent, I would be pretty awkward and I'd try and be as helpful as possible and tell as much as possible.
yeah,
This guy, he's as ice cold and almost like monosyllabic as he is in Le Piscine, and also a little bit confident, a little bit arrogant, you know. And during that, I think, as you know, like during he's being interviewed by the police, the phone rings. This actually happens, and there's well, I don't want to ruin it too much, but there's somebody
yeah. There's
related to
the
Markovic
suggestion of
saying
what has
like
happened. Yeah,
what's actually happened. Because as far as the police were, Markovic's been
bludgeon.
battered over the back of the head. And this guy phones up saying, I know he was shot in the back of the head. The police ignore it. And later on, they exhume his body and discover
Yeah,
he was shot in the back of the head. Ever since then, X-rays are carried out on bodies found in France. And you're just like, it's so cinematic, this scene of these young policeman going down to interview Delon, who is a huge star, and they've all seen in a cinema. The
yeah,
Samurai came out the year before, and they all know about it. They all spoke about it. I spoke to police, and like we'd all seen the Samurai. It was like the big conversation was, would we have caught it? This kind of stuff. And so now they're face to face with the guy who's playing the role, and you're just, yeah, it's
I
just
mean,
like
do you think he
filming
just
within something else.
his whole life was just acting, that he was
I
just playing a
think so.
role? And that
Mm.
it's interesting because I kind of thought, having read your book, that it kind of like there was a parallel between him and Stevan because they kind of like had sort of come from nothing
Yeah,
and they were trying to be the whole kind of bespoke shoe, the kind of like the tailor-made clothes and kind of like and trying to be this person that they kind of weren't, but they were. So
yeah.
there's it's just all acting all the time.
Yeah, and these people, I think, especially when they get to this certain level of success and fame and celebrity or notoriety, in the case of the gangsters and stuff, like they do act like they're in a film. We've got this fantastic gangster character,
Yeah.
Francois Marc Anthony,
Oh my God.
I mean, the guy probably it was responsible for carrying out the hit or
Yeah.
very definitely organizing it. He went on to write 5 or 6 books about it, saying like who killed Mark Anthony,
What is it kind of
who
like an
killed
OJ
Markovich and
Simpson,
stuff.
like if I did it kind of scenario?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Loads of books about it. He died in it for years, but he was really, really a fascinating character. He used to wear snakeskin shoes. He always had big Monte Cristo cigars,
Yeah.
fedoras. He drove around in fancy cars. And I'd read all this stuff. I couldn't even put it in the book, but there's one funny thing. Like, there's a new like head of the local police station where he lives took over, and so he said like, this Mark Anthony guy, let's get him in. I want to show him, remind him who's boss, a new sheriff in town, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so he says to him like, just so you know, I don't want any messing around on my watch. I want, yeah, yeah, yeah. I want you to, you're going to stay and check when it's my watch. And Mark Anthony is like, of course, sir, of course, sir. He leaves, and then he comes back the next day, and he's at the like reception, and he's like, I want to speak to the chief, whatever. And they're like, well, what? You can't just walk in here and speak to the chief. And the chief comes in like, what the hell's going on, Mark Antony? And he's gone and got himself a tailor-made check suit. And he says, just want to show you that I'm staying in check, as you asked, with his cigar on the go. And then walks out. And all this stuff is true. Like this guy, and he'd obviously been in the resistance, but he was related to like several unsolved killings. He was
Yeah.
considered one of the kind of like quite important people in the Corsican mafia and stuff. And they lived and they drove around and, like
But
in
they're
these
sort of
cars,
trying to
hanging out in
be film
cafes.
stars, aren't they? They're trying to be like
Like, totally.
gangsters in the way that like Jean-Pierre Melville was like dressed like an American gangster to be a director, which is
Right.
always hilarious when you
Yeah,
look at
yeah, yeah.
pictures of him. Because you're like, hang on, are you in the film or are you directing it?
Always the dark glasses and the Stetson.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. So like all the gangsters used to like love vaunting their credentials of hanging, knowing celebrities, film stars, right? So they used to go to clubs, and Mark Antony was always super proud to say he was friends with these singers and actors and stuff, including Delon. And then the other side of the like fence is Delon, who's an actor who's
Yeah.
really proud to say he knows real gangsters and stuff, because it kind of fed into both of them legitimizing themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of peculiar actually, because it's kind of like if you go back to like the 60s with the craze and kind of like the relationships that they had with celebrities, but I don't
Mm.
feel like the celebrities were kind of being quite so overt. It's like they were hanging around
Yeah.
them, but they weren't kind of, really kind of like showing it.
It was kind of glamorous in Paris. And that's also something I sort of tried to explain as well, which was I discovered as well, was the fact that because of the occupation in the UK, there wasn't this occupation.
Yes.
And the occupation really changed French society in a way that's hard for us to imagine. But it put simply, it's like the Nazis invaded, occupied the country. And if you were a criminal or,
Yeah.
on the right side of the law, you had two choices. You could either collaborate, which you'd make a quick buck, and you see this like in Simenon novels and stuff. These guys who become part of
Yes.
the local militia, or you can go and join the resistance. And so half the crime families, joined them, collaborated, got rich. The other bunch of criminals went with the people who were going to then become part of de Gaulle's government
Yeah.
afterwards, not realizing, and fought on the same side in the resistance. So after the war, you've got these people in government, in cabinet, who are head of the police, head of all sorts of different things, running casinos and stuff. And then you've got the people on the other side of the divide, the criminals, because now
Yeah.
we've got rid of all the criminals who had been collaborating. And so it's these guys have taken over. They'd be given casino licenses and stuff, for
Yeah.
example. And they all knew each other. So
Or they
yes, you
became
had
the
like
mayor
the
of
good and the
Marseille,
bad.
things like, things
Well,
like that.
exactly. You become mayors, exactly. You control things. And so it's very almost like fluid. It's not like a strict boundary like in the UK. It's
Well,
not like criminal and
it's not
policeman.
black and white, is it?
No.
It's a bit more nuanced because it's kind of like you say you had like two routes almost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
And that's what Mark Antony says. He said, like, I could have become a policeman, but what was it? Once I tasted champagne, I realized that wasn't the way for
yeah.
me.
And it's also and it sort of explains the guns as well, the fact that there were so many guns just knocking about around the whole country and kind of like and that kind of obsession with it. So do you know what I was going to ask you? Because we're sort of running out of time. I was going to ask you about your inspiration as well, because on your website, you've got kind of like, you've got a list of kind of, if you like these kind of authors, but obviously we've kind of mentioned
Mm.
Simenon, who's just like the most amazing,
Yeah, his
like,
Roman
really,
Dieu, his like hard novels, I think are fantastic.
they're so dark as well. He's like, the stuff that he writes is like beyond
It's
dark.
incredible. Yeah. And just the sheer volume of his output still amazes me. That I didn't know how many books he wrote. There were so many. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
how
mean,
yeah.
yeah. So, and in terms of kind of like films and things like that, because obviously you really do have a really cinematic eye because it's just the way you write and stuff. What are the kind of like other kind of films and kind of directors and stuff that inspire you?
I mean, for this specific book, I was very much in the 50s and
Yeah,
60s French film, the world. I love, we've mentioned Melville already and stuff, but you can go back towards like Elevator to the Gallows.
yeah,
Godard obviously is a really good example as well. And I know it's his most famous film, Breathless, Au bout de souffle. But there was so many similarities with this character, this sort of Markovich character, who was a sort of freewheeling, free talking, small time crook that got
yeah,
himself into more trouble. And what I really liked about and Truffaut and all these kind of guys as well, and we've spoken about Rafifi and
yeah,
Bob Le Flambeur and all these fantastic films, of Deuxième Souffle. I mean, for me, I can just watch these films over and over and over and over and again. But what was I going to say? I was going to say something about yeah. But one of the things I quite enjoyed was that or what that was really useful, sorry, was that with the new way, there was this explosion of cinema. There was young people making films essentially about their life. They were done on the cheap. They were done often in places, not in studios, but in real cafes, in real
Yeah,
streets with real cars, with non-actors. A little bit like, and another one of my great passions is the all the Italian cinema, neorealismo. So everything from like the post-war period, again, similar way, using like real people, not professional actors, whether
yeah.
it's the bicycle thief or Rossellini or anything of these big directors. Sorry, like some small kids going away.
No, don't worry. It's
But
fine.
yeah, and so as a writer and researching, it really helped me to be able to watch all these films and to see what Paris looked like. And there was
Yeah,
documentaries people are making. Agnes Varda, just like, Cleo de Saint Cassette, like you can wander around Paris and I can see what it looked like at that particular time. So I was listening to a lot of sort of late 50s, 60s jazz music because I'd work at
brilliant.
night this
Yeah,
time, and watching just tons of French films, even up to the later Delon, not even, it's not too late, but sort of 70s Delon, and
yeah.
even just to get a sense of it all. And that really set the scene and kept me like thematically on
It's
track because
also
there's
it's
a
kind of
tendency to
interesting, isn't
maybe
it,
go
as
to
well,
different places.
that you mentioned music, and it's kind of like because the music in these films is just incredible as well, and it kind of like
Oh
it's
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
fusion of jazz and stuff. And um, so do you what? So do you mainly write at night then?
Well, it's funny. I mean, my first book I wrote really early in the mornings. I'd get up sort of, yeah, before 5, and I'd do the
Yeah,
lion's share of writing in the morning, which I really enjoyed because when you wake up early, you're kind of in this sort of liminal dream wake
yeah,
up sort of space, and it was very dark outside, and I was living in a kind of shed, another story for another time, sort of shed in a garden in Switzerland, and so I'd see like dawn break over this small garden, and that was nice. But then this time around, it was different because I've got a small boy. He's about to be 5, but it was
okay,
sort of between three, 2 and 4 when I was
yeah,
writing. And so mornings, getting up early I wasn't getting enough sleep, so it wasn't really possible. So I found it was the evenings were the best time. And so I just, lights down, put on, a bit of jazz and then write in the evening,
amazing,
which helps set the scene. Yeah,
cool. Right, we've only got 2 minutes left, so do you want to do a message to Rebel Reel for that I'll play
sure.
tomorrow before the film? So John Waters, I got John Waters to do this, and he just said, "Hey, everyone at Rebel Reel, love what you're doing. But if you want to kind of think, oh, I should have got you to write something really, but something along the lines of enjoy la piscine or whatever, um, Rebel Reel, whatever you want to say."
Sure.